Don't Believe Everything You Think, written by Joseph Nguyen. Introduction. In the introduction of Don't Believe Everything You Think, Joseph Nguyen sets the stage by challenging a deeply ingrained habit we all share, our tendency to automatically believe every thought that crosses our minds. Nguyen points out that the mind operates on a set of default patterns shaped by our upbringing, society, and past experiences. These habitual ways of thinking can keep us trapped in cycles of stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction, making it difficult for us to experience true, lasting happiness. Nguyen explains that these mental patterns are not reality. They are simply interpretations and judgments formed by the mind. He suggests that if we can start to recognize and question our thoughts rather than blindly accepting them, we unlock the potential to shift our inner experience. By becoming aware of this automatic habit of believing our thoughts, we open the door to a more intentional, peaceful way of living. The introduction highlights a key insight, that much of our mental suffering comes from an over-reliance on these habitual thought patterns. Nguyen invites readers to consider that they are not their thoughts, and that there is freedom in realizing that thoughts do not have to define who we are or how we feel. This initial insight lays the groundwork for the rest of the book, which guides readers through practical steps for reevaluating and transforming their relationship with their mind. Nguyen's goal in the introduction is to encourage readers to approach the rest of the book with an open mind, willing to examine and even challenge their own inner narratives. This fundamental shift in perspective, he argues, can lead to a life filled with more peace, self-compassion, and fulfillment. Chapter 1. The Source of Our Suffering. In Chapter 1, The Source of Our Suffering, Joseph Nguyen presents the fundamental idea that much of the suffering we experience is self-generated, originating not from outside events or circumstances, but from within our own minds. He suggests that our habitual thought patterns play a critical role in shaping how we perceive and react to the world. Nguyen asserts that suffering is perpetuated by our tendency to believe every thought that arises without question or skepticism. Nguyen describes how the mind generates an endless stream of thoughts, many of which are negative or self-critical, reflecting our deepest insecurities, fears, and judgments. These thoughts shape our internal narrative, creating feelings of dissatisfaction, fear, and anxiety. For instance, if we're constantly thinking I'm not good enough or I'll never succeed, we internalize these thoughts as truths, leading to feelings of inadequacy and frustration. Nguyen emphasizes that these thoughts are interpretations, not objective facts, and that most of our distress comes from accepting these interpretations as reality. To begin alleviating this suffering, Nguyen introduces the concept of detachment learning to observe thoughts as they come and go without automatically identifying with them. Detachment involves recognizing that thoughts are transient and often inaccurate reflections of our inner fears, conditioning, and societal influences. He suggests that by stepping back and observing our thoughts rather than becoming absorbed in them, we create distance between our true selves and the mental chatter that often clouds our judgment. This practice of detachment helps us see thoughts as simply products of the mind, not indisputable truths. Nguyen explains that the shift in perspective allows us to gain a sense of freedom and clarity, as we no longer need to be emotionally controlled by every passing thought. Instead of clinging to negative beliefs and fears, we learn to let them go, realizing that suffering diminishes when we stop identifying with the mind's automatic responses. This chapter lays the groundwork for a transformative journey, as it urges readers to question their inner narratives and adopt a more peaceful, discerning relationship with their thoughts. Chapter 2. The Nature of Thought. In this chapter, Joseph Nguyen explores a foundational concept that thoughts themselves are neutral. He proposes that thoughts are not inherently good or bad. Rather, they are simply mental constructs, reflections of our internal dialogue influenced by experiences, culture, and emotions. Nguyen points out that we are often inclined to categorize thoughts as positive or negative, but this tendency to judge can lead us into patterns of anxiety, stress, or self-doubt. By recognizing thoughts as mere mental events rather than absolute truths, we can begin to shift our perspective on reality. Nguyen discusses how our thoughts, while intangible, significantly shape our perception of life. When we believe every thought without questioning it, we often reinforce limiting beliefs, negative self-image, or habitual patterns of fear. For example, a thought like "I'm not good enough" may arise from a past experience or a fleeting feeling, but when we take it at face value, it influences how we see ourselves and behave. Over time, these unquestioned thoughts create a filter through which we see the world, impacting our relationships, decisions, and overall well-being. To help readers break free from this mental conditioning, Nguyen encouraged the practice of observing thoughts non-judgmentally. Rather than automatically accepting or reacting to every thought, he suggests taking a step back and noticing thoughts as they arise, similar to watching clouds pass by. This technique, often rooted in mindfulness, helps us become more aware of the content and nature of our thoughts without immediately labeling them or letting them dictate our emotions. This process of detached observation, Nguyen explains, helps us to see that thoughts are impermanent. Like clouds in the sky, thoughts come and go, and their intensity or frequency doesn't determine their truth. By becoming observers of our own minds, we create a healthy distance between ourselves and our thoughts, reducing emotional reactivity and enabling us to respond more intentionally to situations. This mindful awareness allows us to choose which thoughts to engage with, which to discard, and which align with our true values and intentions. Ultimately, Nguyen emphasizes that we cannot control every thought that enters our minds, but we can control how we respond to them. By developing the habit of non-judgmental awareness, we can reshape our experience of life, letting go of automatic, unhelpful reactions and cultivating a more peaceful, centered state of being. This understanding of thought as a flexible, manageable aspect of the mind empowers us to engage more meaningfully with ourselves and our lives. Chapter 3. The Illusion of Control. In this chapter, Nguyen delves into one of the most pervasive mental traps, the illusion that we can and should control everything in life. He explains that, from a young age, society often instills a belief in us that we must actively manage every aspect of our lives to achieve security, success, and happiness. This need for control seems like a way to protect ourselves from discomfort, unpredictability, and failure. However, it often has the opposite effect, leading to chronic frustration, stress, and even despair, as life rarely conforms to our plans. Nguyen emphasizes that control is an illusion because much of life is inherently uncertain. We can make plans, set goals, and prepare meticulously, but countless factors remain outside our influence. Events unfold, people change, and outcomes are often shaped by forces beyond what we can foresee. When we try to micromanage or manipulate situations, we become mentally and emotionally exhausted, and ultimately, we suffer when life doesn't obey our desires. Nguyen argues that the compulsion to control our thoughts, emotions, and external circumstances prevents us from experiencing genuine peace and freedom. Constantly monitoring and evaluating everything around us adds layers of tension and anxiety to our lives as we become overly focused on fixing or perfecting situations. In trying to protect ourselves, we inadvertently trap ourselves in a cycle of resistance, fighting against the natural ebb and flow of life, which only deepens our distress. Instead, Nguyen advocates for the powerful practice of letting go. He explains that by releasing our need to control, we begin to feel a sense of liberation. This doesn't mean we abandon our goals or stop making efforts to create positive change. Rather, it means we recognize that we cannot dictate outcomes. By embracing the inherent uncertainty of life, we allow things to unfold without our constant interference, and paradoxically, this often leads to more positive and harmonious experiences. Through this approach, Nguyen highlights that letting go of control brings a deeper sense of trust and resilience. When we accept that change and unpredictability are natural, we stop taking outcomes so personally and stop reacting with disappointment or anger when things don't go as planned. This shift allows us to flow with life rather than fight against it, cultivating inner peace and a more open, flexible approach to challenges. Ultimately, this chapter teaches that letting go of control is not about passivity, but about allowing ourselves to experience life as it is, without resistance. It's a radical acceptance that frees us from the mental prisons we often construct. By releasing control, we stop judging each situation and start experiencing each moment fully, leading to a life characterized by greater ease, adaptability, and inner freedom. Chapter 4. What Happiness Truly Is. In Chapter 4, What Happiness Truly Is, Joseph Nguyen delves into a transformative view of happiness, challenging the common notion that happiness is tied to external achievements, possessions, or circumstances. Nguyen posits that the pursuit of happiness as something that must be attained or earned is inherently flawed. Instead, he suggests that genuine happiness is a state of inner peace, a deep-seated contentment that arises from within when we let go of external validations and align with our true values. Nguyen argues that the problem with conventional ideas of happiness is that they depend on factors we can't always control, such as wealth, success, or social approval. These external measures may provide temporary satisfaction, but they leave us vulnerable to disappointment and dissatisfaction as circumstances change. This conditional form of happiness keeps us in a perpetual cycle of seeking more achievements, more possessions, or more recognition while neglecting the true source of lasting happiness, inner peace. To experience real happiness, Nguyen encourages us to stop resisting reality. When we resist or reject the present moment, thinking things should be different or believing that we'll only be happy when we achieve a specific outcome, we create internal conflict and dissatisfaction. Instead, he suggests embracing life as it is and finding peace in each moment, even if it's not exactly as we'd like. This acceptance frees us from constant striving and struggling, making room for a natural sense of contentment to emerge. Nguyen further explains that happiness is not about changing our circumstances, but about shifting our relationship with them. When we stop placing conditions on our happiness, we can find joy and peace regardless of external situations. This shift in perspective involves redefining happiness as something that doesn't need to be chased or attained, but rather discovered within ourselves. It's about tuning into our inner values and living authentically, which naturally brings a sense of fulfillment. This chapter ultimately encouraged readers to see happiness as a journey within, a practice of aligning with one's true self rather than a race toward external milestones. Nguyen's view of happiness as inner peace emphasizes that happiness is a state of being, not a goal to be reached. By embracing this inner journey, we cultivate a sense of wholeness that isn't easily shaken by life's ups and downs, making happiness an ongoing, accessible experience rather than a fleeting achievement. Chapter 5. The Role of Ego in Our Suffering. In this chapter, Joseph Nguyen delves deeply into the ego's role in generating much of our inner turmoil. He describes the ego as an internal voice that continually demands validation, approval, and comparison with others. This voice is relentless, always measuring ourselves against others or societal standards, leading us to question our worth and feel insecure or inadequate. This is not just a passing state, but an ongoing cycle that keeps us on edge, needing to prove our value or success. Nguyen emphasizes that the ego's strength lies in our identification with it. When we believe that our thoughts define who we are, we're pulled into the ego's grip, mistaking these fleeting mental constructs for our true self. The ego loves to weave stories around our self-worth, telling us we're not good enough, not as successful as others, or that we must earn love and acceptance through achievements or appearance. These stories fuel a sense of lack and create emotional suffering as we chase goals and validations that ultimately fail to satisfy. The book also highlights how the ego sustains this cycle by creating divisions between us and them, fostering feelings of superiority or inferiority. This comparison fosters jealousy, resentment, or even superiority, which only further deepens the divide and distances us from authentic connections with others. Instead of feeling secure and at peace, we remain trapped in these narratives, feeling perpetually unfulfilled and anxious. Nguyen suggests that one of the first steps to overcoming the ego's grip is to start observing our thoughts without believing them to be true. Recognizing that these judgments, comparisons, and insecurities are just products of the ego rather than actual reflections of reality can help us detach and regain our sense of self. Through practices such as mindfulness and self-inquiry, we can step back and view the ego's demands as separate from our essence. By disengaging from the ego's narratives, we gradually find a more peaceful, authentic self that doesn't need external validation to feel whole. This detachment leads to a profound sense of self-acceptance, freeing us from the constant need for comparison, approval, and validation. True peace, Nguyen concludes, comes not from conquering the world or proving oneself, but from loosening the grip of the ego and finding comfort in simply being who we are. This shift from ego-driven pursuits to inner peace is the path to a more fulfilling and joyful life. Chapter 6, The Path to Inner Peace. In Chapter 6, Nguyen delves into the journey of cultivating inner peace, which he presents as a conscious practice rather than a destination. He introduces several key techniques that, when practiced regularly, can help us quiet the mind and release attachment to thoughts that cause suffering. These techniques include mindfulness, meditation, and self-inquiry, each designed to enhance self-awareness and bring us closer to a state of calm and contentment. Mindfulness. Nguyen emphasizes mindfulness as a foundational tool for achieving inner peace. Mindfulness, he explains, is the practice of being fully present with whatever we are experiencing in the moment. It involves observing our thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations without judgment or reaction. Through mindfulness, we learn to see our thoughts as passing events rather than identifying with them. This awareness helps us break free from automatic mental reactions and the habit of letting our thoughts define us. By grounding ourselves in the present, we can disengage from the endless cycle of worry and regret that often leads to emotional turbulence. Meditation. Meditation, according to Nguyen, is a powerful method for training the mind to stay present and for deepening our capacity for inner peace. Through meditation, we learn to focus on a single point of attention, whether it's our breath, a mantra, or simply the silence within. This practice builds mental discipline and allows us to observe our thoughts without becoming attached to them. Meditation also enables us to cultivate a sense of inner stillness, a space within ourselves where we can connect with a deeper awareness beyond the mind's constant chatter. Nguyen suggests that even a few minutes of daily meditation can gradually shift our mental habits, helping us react to life's challenges with greater calm and resilience. Self-inquiry. Another technique Nguyen explores is self-inquiry, which involves examining our thoughts and beliefs to determine whether they serve our well-being or contribute to suffering. Self-inquiry encourages us to ask critical questions such as, is this thought true? Or does this belief align with my values and goals? By challenging our thoughts and recognizing when they are unhelpful or inaccurate, we can release them more easily. Self-inquiry helps us discern between thoughts that support our peace and those that disrupt it, guiding us toward a clearer, more grounded perspective on ourselves and our lives. Detachment from thought. Nguyen further explains that detachment is essential to cultivating inner peace. When we detach from thoughts, we stop identifying with them or allowing them to dictate our emotions. Instead, we observe them as if we were watching clouds pass in the sky. Detachment isn't about suppressing or ignoring thoughts. Rather, it's about understanding that thoughts are transient, often irrational, and don't necessarily reflect reality. This shift in perception allows us to experience our thoughts without being overwhelmed by them, making it easier to maintain a peaceful state of mind. Focusing on the present. Nguyen underscores that true peace is found only in the present moment. Often, our minds are preoccupied with past regrets or future worries, which prevents us from fully engaging with the here and now. By practicing mindfulness and meditation, we learn to anchor ourselves in the present, which is the only moment we can directly experience and influence. Focusing on the present reduces the power of anxiety and regret, allowing us to respond to life's events more calmly and effectively. Inner peace beyond external circumstances. Nguyen concludes the chapter by highlighting that inner peace is not dependent on external circumstances. Rather, it arises from our inner state. External situations are inherently unpredictable and beyond our control, but by developing the inner resources of mindfulness, meditation, and detachment, we cultivate a sense of peace that remains intact regardless of what happens around us. This inner peace allows us to navigate life's challenges with clarity and resilience, unshaken by the ups and downs of external events. In sum, Chapter 6 outlines a clear path to inner peace through practical and accessible techniques. Nguyen's approach encourages us to shift from a reactive way of thinking to a mindful, centered, and peaceful state that we can access at any moment. By adopting these practices, we can build a more stable foundation for enduring peace and well-being, free from the constant sway of our thoughts and external circumstances. Chapter 7, The Power of Presence. In this pivotal chapter, Nguyen dives deeply into the concept of presence, illustrating how truly being in the moment can transform our experience of life. He begins by explaining that our minds are naturally inclined to dwell in the past or project into the future. This mental habit often stems from unresolved emotions or habitual worry, which, over time, become ingrained patterns. By constantly ruminating on past events or anticipating future outcomes, we miss out on the richness of life unfolding in the present. Nguyen describes the mental noise that comes from this kind of thinking, a constant background chatter that disrupts our ability to feel calm, centered, and content. This mental noise is fueled by anxieties, regrets, and plans, which are often accompanied by a sense of incompleteness or dissatisfaction. He argues that this noise distracts us from truly experiencing the world as it is and from genuinely connecting with ourselves and others. The mind's tendency to resist the present moment often results in a sense of disconnection, loneliness, or anxiety. The author posits that the antidote to this disconnection is presence, or anchoring oneself fully in the here and now. Presence is not simply being physically in one place. It involves giving full attention to the moment without judgment, distraction, or mental interference. Nguyen emphasizes that presence allows for clarity, as it strips away the clutter of unnecessary thoughts and enables us to see situations, emotions, and people more objectively. He explains that true presence requires practice, as it goes against our mind's habitual pull toward the past or future. Nguyen introduces several practical exercises to cultivate this skill, which involve mindfulness techniques and grounding practices. For instance, he suggests focusing on the breath as a way to draw attention back to the body and the current moment, since the breath is always happening in the now. He also recommends simple sensory awareness exercises such as feeling textures, listening to sounds, or noticing visual details to bring oneself back from distracting thoughts. Nguyen also discusses the profound impact that presence can have on emotional well-being. By practicing presence, we can experience emotions as they arise without judgment or resistance. Instead of avoiding or suppressing negative emotions, we can observe them, allowing them to naturally pass without becoming consumed by them. This approach to emotions reduces their intensity and allows us to respond rather than react. Furthermore, presence can improve relationships, as it enables us to listen fully and engage deeply with others. When we're present, we listen without planning a response or making assumptions. This fosters empathy, connection, and understanding, as we're no longer interpreting others' words through the filter of our own mental chatter. Nguyen explains that presence in relationships cultivates trust, as it creates space for authentic communication and mutual respect. In conclusion, Nguyen asserts that presence is a skill that requires consistent practice but offers immense rewards. By learning to let go of past regrets and future anxieties, we can live more harmoniously and experience life with a clearer, more peaceful mind. Presence, he argues, is not just a technique but a way of life, a path to finding true contentment and appreciating each moment fully. Chapter 8, Detachment from Thought. In Don't Believe Everything You Think, Nguyen emphasizes that one of the most liberating practices is learning to detach from thoughts rather than being defined by them. He points out that most of us live in a near constant state of identification with our thoughts, meaning we often mistake them for who we are. When we think, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never succeed," we take these thoughts as fact and allow them to shape our self-concept and behavior. However, Nguyen argues that this pattern leads to unnecessary suffering and limits our potential. Observing thoughts without identification. Nguyen introduces the idea that thoughts are merely mental events. They come and go, just as clouds pass through the sky. He encouraged readers to practice observing their thoughts as if from a distance, almost as an objective bystander. This doesn't mean ignoring or suppressing thoughts, but instead witnessing them without automatically accepting them as truth. By simply observing thoughts as they arise and recognizing that they are temporary and separate from our true selves, we can begin to break free from their influence. This practice of detached observation is at the core of mindfulness and self-awareness. When we can watch our thoughts without immediately reacting to them or internalizing them, we create space to decide how we want to respond. This detachment prevents us from being swept away by impulsive reactions or unproductive rumination, fostering a calmer, clearer mental state. Realizing thoughts don't define us. Nguyen underscores that our thoughts are not our identity. They're merely reflections of our past experiences, conditioning, and current mood. For example, if someone has a recurring thought that "I'm not worthy," it may stem from past criticism or failure rather than an objective truth about their value. By learning to separate themselves from such thoughts, individuals can start to build a healthier self-image, one that isn't tainted by fleeting mental patterns. This realization that thoughts don't define us can be profoundly liberating. When we stop identifying with every thought that arises, we're no longer chained to feelings of inadequacy, fear, or guilt. Instead, we can see ourselves as the observer of these thoughts, someone who is far more vast and complex than any one thought or belief. Cultivating compassion through detachment. Another benefit of detaching from thoughts is that it allows us to cultivate compassion, both for ourselves and for others. When we understand that thoughts are not definitive truths, we're less likely to judge ourselves harshly for negative or unkind thoughts. Instead, we can view these thoughts with curiosity and acceptance, understanding that they're simply a part of the human experience. This compassionate stance extends outward as well. Recognizing that others' behaviors are often driven by their own unexamined thoughts and beliefs can make us more empathetic. Instead of reacting to others with judgment or defensiveness, we can approach them with greater understanding, realizing that they, too, may be struggling with their own mental patterns. Freeing ourselves from limiting beliefs. Nguyen argues that limiting beliefs are among the most common obstacles to self-growth and fulfillment. These beliefs, such as "I'm not smart enough," "I don't deserve happiness," or "I'll never be successful," are often deeply ingrained and go unchallenged for years. By detaching from our thoughts, we give ourselves a chance to question these limiting beliefs and to see them for what they are, old mental habits rather than absolute truths. Through this practice, we create the mental space needed to replace limiting beliefs with empowering ones. For example, instead of automatically accepting "I'm not capable of this," we might replace it with "I'm willing to try and learn," This subtle shift allows us to approach challenges with a growth mindset, increasing our resilience and willingness to take positive action. Practical techniques for detachment. Nguyen provides practical exercises to help readers develop this skill of detachment. One common method is mindfulness meditation, where the goal is to sit quietly, notice thoughts as they come, and let them go without judgment. Another technique involves journaling, which allows us to write down our thoughts and examine them from an outside perspective. By consistently practicing these techniques, we can gradually weaken the automatic hold that thoughts have on us, replacing reactivity with greater awareness and intentionality. Chapter 9. Living Beyond the Mind. In Chapter 9, Joseph Nguyen explores the concept of living beyond the mind as a pathway to experiencing a life that is richer, more authentic, and aligned with our true selves. He begins by examining the limitations of the mind, specifically how our conditioned thought patterns restrict our sense of self and keep us in repetitive cycles of behavior, perception, and emotional response. Nguyen argues that to live a fulfilled life, we must break free from these mental limitations and learn to connect with a more profound, innate wisdom within us. Nguyen explains that much of our thinking is habitual. We constantly replay the same ideas, beliefs, and assumptions without questioning their validity. This mental autopilot mode limits our experiences, filtering everything through past conditioning, fears, and judgments. Living beyond the mind, then, involves disengaging from this automated thinking process and moving into a state of openness where we can respond to life more genuinely without being influenced by preconceived notions. Key practices for transcending mental patterns. Nguyen offers 3 main practices for living beyond the mind: developing intuition, practicing kindness, and cultivating self-awareness. 1. Intuition. Nguyen emphasizes that intuition is a powerful guide that exists beyond logical thought. Unlike the intellect, which often relies on linear reasoning and past knowledge, intuition taps into a deeper understanding that feels natural and immediate. By tuning into intuition, we learn to make decisions based on a sense of knowing rather than overthinking. This process involves trusting the body's natural cues, like feelings and gut instincts, rather than solely relying on mental analysis. Nguyen suggests that intuitive insights often align with our true values and aspirations, allowing us to act in ways that are more fulfilling and authentic. 2. Kindness. The second practice, kindness, goes beyond just being nice to others. It's about embodying compassion in every interaction, including how we treat ourselves. Nguyen believes that kindness is a direct expression of our true nature, one that can soften the grip of the ego and dissolve the mental barriers separating us from others. By cultivating kindness, we open ourselves to new perspectives, building connections that aren't limited by judgment or preconceived ideas. This practice not only improves relationships, but also helps us foster a sense of unity and connectedness, breaking down the walls of the self-centered mind. 3. Self-awareness. Self-awareness, the third practice, is foundational to all forms of personal growth. Nguyen emphasizes the importance of observing our thoughts and behaviors without attaching judgment to them. By becoming aware of our conditioned patterns, we can gradually loosen their hold over us. Self-awareness allows us to recognize when we're reacting automatically and offers the choice to respond differently. This conscious choice is key to breaking out of repetitive cycles and expanding our sense of self beyond mental constructs. Nguyen points out that self-awareness is a lifelong practice. The more we cultivate it, the more freedom we experience from the mind's limitations. Embracing a more expansive self. As we integrate these practices into our lives, Nguyen explains that we begin to experience ourselves as more than just our thoughts. This expansion of self goes beyond the ego's narrow, fear-driven narratives and opens us up to a deeper awareness, where peace and contentment are our natural states. Living beyond the mind means we no longer define ourselves by our insecurities, past traumas, or future anxieties. Instead, we relate to the world from a place of openness, creativity, and inner calm. Nguyen illustrates this concept with the analogy of a clear sky and passing clouds. The sky represents our true self, vast, open, and unaffected, while thoughts are like clouds that come and go. When we identify too closely with thoughts, we get caught up in the clouds, losing sight of the expansive sky that is our real nature. By learning to watch our thoughts without attachment, we start to experience life from this spacious sky perspective, where peace and clarity naturally emerge. The power of choice and freedom. Nguyen closes the chapter by emphasizing the freedom that comes with living beyond the mind. When we no longer identify with every thought or belief that arises, we are no longer bound by them. This detachment doesn't mean suppressing thoughts or emotions, but rather seeing them for what they are: temporary, passing phenomena. This perspective frees us to choose our responses consciously rather than reacting based on old mental patterns. Through these practices of intuition, kindness, and self-awareness, Nguyen encouraged readers to cultivate a life that transcends mental limitations and is aligned with a deeper, more authentic way of being. Living beyond the mind, he suggests, is not about escaping the mind, but rather about using it as a tool while staying connected to the vast, intuitive, and compassionate self that lies beyond thought. This chapter serves as an invitation to explore this freedom and experience the world from a state of inner peace and awareness. Chapter 10, Awakening to the Present Moment. In Chapter 10, Awakening to the Present Moment, Nguyen wraps up his journey by emphasizing that finding peace and presence is an ongoing process, not a destination. He encouraged readers to view life as a continuous practice of waking up to each moment, reminding us that true peace arises not from controlling thoughts, but from observing and understanding them without judgment. Nguyen underscores the importance of cultivating compassion for ourselves on this path. He acknowledges that we'll inevitably encounter setbacks, but self-compassion helps us respond to these moments with kindness rather than frustration. This gentle approach to personal growth allows us to avoid the trap of perfectionism, accepting that moments of clarity and moments of distraction are both natural parts of the journey. A central concept in this chapter is the idea of moving from autopilot thinking to deliberate awareness. Autopilot thinking occurs when we unconsciously react to life based on ingrained habits and patterns, often leading to stress and dissatisfaction. Nguyen suggests that by consciously choosing awareness, we can break free from this cycle. Through practices like mindfulness and regular self-reflection, we can train our minds to return to the present moment whenever we notice we're drifting. Nguyen also explains that consistent awareness helps cultivate a sense of inner stillness and fulfillment. When we engage fully with each moment, free from the weight of past regrets or future anxieties, we find a deep sense of contentment. This inner stillness allows us to experience the beauty and richness of life without constantly seeking external validation or achievements. Ultimately, Nguyen's message in this final chapter is that awakening to the present moment is a lifelong commitment. Each moment offers an opportunity to reconnect with ourselves, deepen our awareness, and experience life as it truly is, beyond the illusions created by the mind. This ongoing practice, he suggests, is the key to living a life of peace, fulfillment, and genuine happiness. Conclusion. In the conclusion of Don't Believe Everything You Think, Joseph Nguyen brings together the book's core ideas with a powerful reminder. True happiness and inner peace are attainable only when we realize that our thoughts are not absolute truths. Nguyen emphasizes that much of our suffering stems from taking our thoughts as reality, believing that they define who we are and what we're capable of. He argues that thoughts are merely constructs of the mind, often influenced by past experiences, fears, and conditioning, and they don't necessarily reflect the truth of our lives or our potential. Nguyen urges readers to step back from their thoughts, observing them without judgment or attachment. By doing so, we can begin to see thoughts for what they are: transient mental events rather than unchangeable facts. This detachment frees us from the mental constraints that often lead to self-doubt, anxiety, and unhappiness. When we stop identifying so closely with our thoughts, we open up space for a more expansive and meaningful life, unburdened by negative beliefs and unnecessary fears. The tools Nguyen offers, such as mindfulness, self-inquiry, and present moment awareness, are practical methods to help readers navigate their own minds with compassion and clarity. These practices encourage us to break free from patterns of overthinking, rumination, and the constant pursuit of external validation. By cultivating these habits, we become more aligned with our authentic selves and can experience life in a way that feels more present, fulfilling, and aligned with inner peace. Nguyen concludes with an empowering message. True happiness is not about changing the external world or achieving specific outcomes, but about changing our relationship with our thoughts. By embracing the present moment and letting go of mental constraints, we can live a more meaningful life, one marked by joy, freedom, and a deeper understanding of our true selves.